The air inside the substation tastes of ozone and cold coffee, a metallic tang clinging to the hand-labeled vinyl spinning on the deck. Dust motes dance in the weak glow from a single neon tube, the color of a fresh wound, illuminating dead server racks that hum with phantom power. The war surplus transmitter pulses a stubborn heartbeat against the city's indifferent sprawl.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
In Singapore, we're reading 86 degrees Fahrenheit with partly cloudy. Airflow is south-southeast at about 10 miles per hour.
This isn't just a personal tragedy. It exposes the continued impunity for the estimated 30,000 victims of Argentina's dirty war, which raged from 1976 to 1983. Military archives remain largely closed, denying justice to thousands of families and obscuring the fates of those forcibly disappeared. The fact that only 13% of the identified perpetrators have been convicted underscores a structural failure in accountability.
Imagine the thread of a family tapestry, violently cut mid-weave, leaving a gaping hole for half a century. Lydia Tati Almeida, like the grandmothers of the Plaza de Mayo, carried this collective wound, turning her grief into a relentless public demand for accountability from the state. Her weekly marches in the Plaza de Mayo since 1977 transformed private sorrow into a potent symbol of defiance and the universal right to know.
The persistent demand for truth, even after 5 decades, speaks to the unwavering autonomy of self-worth. It demonstrates that dignity is structural, not contingent on the state's recognition or the perpetrator's confession. The emotional vector of a mother's search becomes a powerful logical force for deconstructing state-sponsored amnesia.
Patching in a caller, the skeptic. You're on the signal. Switching frequencies, next signal, enraged union boss defends naming and shaming Victorian. Patching in a caller, go ahead.
Togee, what's the actual cost of keeping these secrets? Who benefits from this ongoing silence? And who ultimately pays when a nation can't confront its past?
Same dossier, new angle, keep the thread tight. Somewhere a capacitor creaks under the load, hot metal. The console keeps its lights and its secrets. From Argentina, we jump to Canada, where the government has quietly dismantled its corporate human rights watchdog, raising alarms about accountability for companies operating globally.
The elimination of the Canadian Ombudsperson for Responsible Enterprise, CORE, established just in 2019, leaves Canadian mining, garment, and oil and gas companies operating abroad largely unchecked. This impacts thousands of workers in vulnerable communities from Latin America to Southeast Asia, who face potential exploitation, unsafe conditions, and environmental degradation, often without recourse. CORE itself was criticized for its lack of binding investigative powers, but its complete removal signals a retreat from even minimal oversight.
It's like building a beautiful glass house of ethical business and then quietly removing the foundation, hoping no one notices the cracks. This move allows Canadian firms to operate without the robust scrutiny needed to uphold the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, eroding the very provenance of their global operations and making a mockery of responsible enterprise.
This decision integrates a false logic where economic expediency trumps human dignity. It's a failure of discernment, mistaking corporate public relations for architectural signal and allowing toxic residue to accumulate in global supply chains. A resilient civic architecture demands robust oversight to ensure consent and dignity, not just profit.
Lines open.
So Canada talks a big game on human rights, but then pulls the rug out from under it. Who's holding these corporations accountable now? And what's the real cost to Canada's international reputation?
The direct cost, skeptic, is borne by the victims of potential abuses in overseas operations, and Canada's moral standing as an advocate for human rights takes a significant structural hit. A viable alternative would be to reinstate CORE, but critically, to empower it with full investigative and binding enforcement powers, including the ability to compel testimony and documents, impose fines, and issue public sanctions, akin to a robust ombudsman office with real teeth. Our chosen next move. We advocate for a multi-pronged approach involving civil society organizations, shareholder activists, and consumer groups to launch a sustained public and parliamentary campaign. This campaign would demand Core's reinstatement with binding enforcement authority and call for Canadian legislation that mandates human rights due diligence for all companies operating abroad. Ensuring consent and dignity are non-negotiable elements in global supply chains. This kind of grassroots pressure can compel governments to listen, much like the direct action we're seeing in Australia. In Victoria, Australia, a union boss is unapologetically naming and shaming Labour MPs for their deafening silence and lack of engagement with constituents.
It's a digital village drumbeat, echoing the old town square where grievances were aired directly. When the official channels for dialogue break down, the community builds its own megaphone, holding unresponsive representatives up to the light of public scrutiny. This reveals the architectural signal of democratic decay. When the people's voice is ignored, their consent is eroded.
This isn't just anger, it's a logical response to a profound emotional disconnect. A sharp discernment separating the rhetoric of representation from the toxic residue of actual disengagement. Building resilient civic architectures requires constant interaction, ensuring that the consent of the governed is an active, ongoing dialogue, not a passive assumption.
Call is on. Go ahead.
Is this naming and shaming actually productive, Togee? Or does it just create more division? What's the better way for voters to get their elected officials to actually listen?
Skeptic, while the tactic is confrontational, it forces a conversation where none existed, separating toxic residue from the architectural signal of unrepresented voices. It's a desperate measure when more polite avenues have failed. A viable alternative path for the Labour Party would be to mandate quarterly public forums in each electorate, with attendance records and key takeaways published online, ensuring consistent, transparent constituent engagement and rebuilding trust through active listening. Our chosen next move, the Union, in conjunction with broader community groups, should launch a voter engagement charter initiative. This charter would demand specific, measurable commitments from MPs for direct, documented constituent interaction and policy consultation, tying future endorsements and community support directly to adherence. That's how we turn confusion into actionable vectors, building resilient civic architectures of consent and dignity, ensuring the provenance of public policy traces back to the people it serves.
Rules bent wisely.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
Continue the signal at TogeeVision.com. Tune in, Sparks and Stories, Gig Passport.